Hello and welcome to USAID Climate Economic Analysis for Development, Investment and Resilience CEADIR Discussion Series. Thank you for joining us today. Our webinar today will discuss opportunities for scaling up renewable energy use and mini-grid in West Africa. My name is Charles Ayenu. I am the West Africa Regional Coordinator for CEADIR. In West Africa, I work with a team of local financial experts to assess the clean energy market in 8 West African countries, including Côte d'Ivoire, Ghana, Guinea, Liberia, Niger, Nigeria, Senegal, and Sierra Leone. Let me now introduce our panelists. Our first speaker is Andrew Riker, an energy advisor and investor based in London, who will present his perspective as a renewable energy investor in Africa. Next, we have Hedy Sharif. Hedy is based in Liberia and is the Director of Energy for the Millennium Challenge account. Hedy will discuss MCA energy market development activities in Liberia. Lastly, we have Chris Camponovo. Chris is based in Washington, D.C., and he is the head of business development for Spark Meter, which work with electricity distribution companies and mini-grid in Nigeria using low-cost, prepay-enabled smart metering systems. Now that we have met our speakers, I would like to share with you some information about CEADIR. CEADIR is a 5-year USAID-funded global activity that is helping countries to assess and scale up low-carbon, climate-resilient development. CEADIR works in over 17 countries to conduct economic, financial, and other analysis needed to make the business and economic case for taking strategic climate adaptation and mitigation actions. Let me kick off the presentation with a quick overview of CEADIR activities in West Africa, which focus on 8 West African countries and will continue through June 2018. There are 3 major tasks under this activity. The team is now finishing the first task, where we interviewed over 50 commercial banks. We also met with local energy sector regulator and independent power producers. As part of the first task, we are drafting a market assessment report on clean energy lending for each country. We will then identify and select 2 commercial banks per country to improve their knowledge of the clean energy sector and ultimately increase their lending to finance ready clean energy projects. During the second and third task, we will work closely with the bank to develop new credit products and oversee the implementation of clean energy lending. We can report this table maps the 7 West African countries where CEADIR works on the factors necessary to create an enabling environment for investors in renewable energy and energy efficiency. As you can see, except for Liberia and Niger, they all fulfill these 5 factors. This positive outcome can be attributed to the fact that a significant number of government and international organizations have supported many local governments with power sector reforms to establish the policy framework to develop an enabling environment. In Ghana, electricity tariff increased sharply from 2012 to 2016, reflecting pressure to bring end-user tariff into closer alignment with service costs and to support the restructuring of the energy sector financed in 2016. At the same time, the depreciation of Ghana cedi against US dollars softened the tariff increases. As a result, Ghana has one of the highest tariffs in West Africa sub-region, which have a ripple effect on residential consumer costs of living, as well as the profitability of industrial firms. This effect was highly pronounced during the period of erratic power supply, given production losses due to outage and the cost of backup power from diesel generators. Grid-connected electric bill remained relatively high across the board, with Ghana leading the pack. We observe that the banking sector across West Africa faces stiffer regulation, high interest rates, high lending costs, currency mismatch, and high collateral requirements amid relatively shorter 10-year loan from 3 to 36 months. As you can see, average interest rate ranges from 9.25% in Senegal to 27% in Ghana, with the other countries in between. To analyze the cost of rooftop solar system per watt across the region, our team obtained over 25 quotes from various installers for 3 kilowatt, 5 kilowatt, and 10 kilowatt systems with battery storage capabilities. The graph shows consistency across the 7 countries. This can be attributed to factors such as a small, uncompetitive market where the technology is relatively unknown, choice of US manufacturer versus Chinese or other low-end manufacturer, the level of incentive provided by local regulators, and the custom duties on renewable energy and energy efficiency equipment. In conclusion, the average price per watt in the region for rooftop solar system of 3 kilowatt to 10 kilowatt ranges from $2.2 per watt to $4.25 per watt. Our team also measured the size of renewable energy and energy efficiency market to find financing and lending opportunity for local commercial banks and investors. Cellular penetration rate was one of the indicators we use because most beyond-the-grid projects tend to rely heavily on cellular technology to operate rural electrification programs. Our data show a linear correlation between cell phone penetration rate and the share of rural population with access to electricity. Rural electrification rates are relatively high in Ghana. Senegal, Nigeria, and Cote d'Ivoire, with Ghana leading the pack at around 50%. This shows that there are tremendous beyond-the-grid opportunity in these countries. In contrast, the rural electrification rates are low in Sierra Leone, Niger, Liberia, and Guinea, which represent even greater beyond-the-grid opportunity for these countries. Thank you. I would like now to turn it over to our first speaker, Andrew Riker. Andrew?
Thank you. Can you hear me, Charles?
Yes, I can.
Great. Good. Thank you. Hello, everyone, and a special hello. I saw that Patrick Daddario is on. Patrick, we should connect offline. Great to see you there. Thank you for coming. Investing in clean energy. I've been in the investment business for 40 years now, and I've been investing in emerging markets infrastructure since 1992, so 25 years. I got very interested in renewables and energy access in Africa when I was Chief Investment Officer and Head of Infrastructure at CDC, the British version of OPIC. Spending rich country taxpayers' money on electricity in Africa has always been justified by arguing that so many people there don't have even basic access, which we all in our countries take for granted, that it makes sense to invest in the power sector. But most of what the development movement has spent for the past 60 years has been on the easy part, which is conventional generation. That's damaged the environment, and it hasn't been connecting people. To borrow a phrase, it's the aid industry's inconvenient truth. The problem isn't electricity generation, it's distribution. The homes we want to connect use tiny amounts of power, and they're hard and expensive to reach. Conventional distribution grids, even most mini grids, cost too much to get power to these people to make economic sense. So if we're going to get this to change, we have to do things differently. We have to do them differently to the ways they are mostly being done today. Oh, I'm trying to advance my slides. Yeah, there we go. The scope of this webinar is really wide, as you can see from this list. Looking at the list, let me talk about what's working and what isn't. Grid-scale renewable power generation is working. Large amounts of institutional capital are going into solar, hydro and wind plants in West Africa connected to the grid, and into privatizations of large-scale distribution grids. If done well, these investments will make solid returns over time, 10 to 12% per annum over periods of 7 to 10 years. And that's about 5% higher than if you invest in the same kinds of assets in the US or Europe. This is here to stay. That's because in many parts of West Africa, like elsewhere in the world, large-scale renewables are now the cheapest generation option. They're the cheapest of all the possibilities to generate power. And then as an investor, we're seeing IPOs of businesses, there are M&A deals, there are single asset sales. As an investor, you can invest, sell investments, and make money. But, as I said before, this does not do anything to solve the lack of universal access. Picking another example from the list, commercial and industrial rooftop solar is also coming on really fast. We're seeing lots of interesting projects in countries like Nigeria and Ghana, and I think this also will be a significant investment class in the next 2 to 3 years. But what is less certain is the new ecosystem of off-grid and energy access startups. For myself, that's what I'm most excited about. But as far as I know, nobody has yet made any money backing these kinds of companies. All of these companies, and I think as we'll hear later, Chris's is a great example, are essentially still unproven. Let's talk for a moment about how they might flourish. The off-grid sector contains the potential game changers that I mentioned earlier, the businesses that will do things differently to get electricity to all the unconnected homes, people in urban slums, people in the deep countryside. Venture capital is like fashion. A new trend goes viral and becomes all the rage for a while, and then suddenly it's gone, and everyone moves on to the next fad. In African off-grid, first for a while it was mini-grids, then it was pay-go solar rooftop home systems, and now these are rather yesterday, and we're waiting to see what comes next. In my view, what we need to see is new types of utility. None of the single solutions, grid extension schemes, mini-grids, distributed home systems, can practically and economically solve the whole of the problem by reaching all of the people simply with their single method. The new utilities are going to have to combine different solutions to serve different types of customers for universal coverage in the service area. They'll get power to some of their users through the grid, to some from a mini-grid, and to some with a standalone system. And if these new types of utilities start reaching a big proportion of the population in their service area, people are going to notice, the government's going to notice, and they will start being regulated one way or another, as all utilities are everywhere else in the world. If we look at the US and Europe, electricity utilities get an exclusive license in their territory on the basis of promising to serve everyone at one rate. at one rate for each type of customer, I should say. The easy-to-reach customers, in effect, subsidize the more remote, harder and expensive to connect users. Why should Africa be any different? Now, aid officials working in Africa regularly say at events like this, we mustn't distort the market. And my question is, why not? We do it at home. Today, none of the companies we see in their current form can solve the universal access problem alone. I don't know how and when this coming together of the various elements is going to happen. It'll probably take longer than any of us hope. It'll be messy. There'll be successes and setbacks. All the groups involved, all the stakeholders, governments, customers, companies, donors, we all need to change our thinking, our understanding, and our actions. And I've only talked about the regulation issue. As you can see from the slide, marketing and finance challenges are just as big. Sadly, I don't know which companies are going to cope with these challenges to emerge as winners, or how long it might take, or what the returns might be. And if I did, I probably wouldn't be telling this meeting. I'd be headed for a fortune. What I can tell you with certainty is that the risks are enormous. But watching this happen is the most fascinating experience I've had in my 40-year investment career. The times really are a-changing. I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Presentation. Now, let me turn it over to Hedy. Hedy? Yes, I can.
Thank you, Charles. Hello, audience. I would like to first and foremost introduce myself quickly. I am Hadi Sharif from the Millennium Challenge account, Liberia. I'm the Energy Director. The Millennium Challenge account, Liberia, is a government agency established by law to serve as the accountable entity for to manage and implement the Millennium Challenge Corporation Liberia Compact. The Liberia Compact is geared towards addressing two key constraints affecting economic growth in the country. One of those constraints is the lack of access to affordable and reliable electricity. As you may be aware, Liberia has one of the lowest access rates to electricity in the world. And also Liberia has one of the highest electricity tariffs in the world at 39 cents. According to a study conducted in 2014-2015, the overall power generation in Liberia was estimated at 376 megawatt. Extrapolating that to current reality, that is just 1/3 of the national utility capacity to generate. That shows a big gap of over 200 megawatt that's been self-generated by companies, businesses, residences, etc. The access rate is less than 5% in Liberia and less than 10% in the country capital. The government of Liberia has been striving in all of these weak ways to create a conducive environment to ensure that the sector receives its needed attention. Policies have been put in place, plans have been developed, the electricity law has been established and ratified, the independent regulator has been established, as well as the establishment of the Rural and Renewable Energy Agency. In addition, donors have been committed to supporting Liberia, and they have invested heavily in the generation and distribution infrastructure in the country. The investment plan for renewable energy was also developed largely for mini-grids and standalone PV systems. Given all of these developments in the sector, the challenges remain huge in the country. Inadequate infrastructure continues to be a major challenge from generation to transmission and distribution.
Thank you, Hari, for your great presentation. You painted a clear picture of MCA, energy market development activities, and the energy sector reform in Liberia. Now let me turn it over to Chris. Chris?
Thanks very much to the organizers of CEADIR and the panelists here for previously the very interesting presentations. Thanks all to the participants for being here. I represent a company called Spark Meter. We are a U.S. company that designs, manufactures, and markets smart meters designed specifically for rural electrification and in emerging markets. I listened with interest to Charles's presentation because I think he struck a very interesting note, I'm sorry, not Charles, it was Andrew's presentation, with regard to the developing new utility model. It's actually quite interesting because we share that vision, and in fact have designed a smart metering system that is targeted to enabling these new utilities. I mean, I think the simple fact is that the old model of central grid utilities that are often state-owned is simply inefficient. It is simply ineffective in electrifying large parts of Africa, including West Africa. And so, as a result, I think Andrew hit the nail on the head when he talked about how interesting it is right now. Because as a result, what we're seeing is all of these new models popping up, in particular in the mini-grid space and the off-grid space, to try to address the deficiencies in this central grid model. I think the slide here, you can see just a basic snapshot of what's happening, or what has been happening in terms of electricity access and losses that central grid utilities suffer, both from brownouts, blackouts, load shedding, and consumers who are not paying for electricity but certainly consuming electricity as opposed to customers. So Spark Meter was designed, every startup has its origin story. Spark Meter grew out of a small NGO mini-grid project in Haiti. We had a group of folks working on that project who looked around and said, we need a smart metering system for this small mini-grid. And that's all based on the fact that your tolerances are much low in your operations on a mini grid. You have a higher need for visibility into your system, because when it goes down, the consequences are much more severe for the group of people who are there on your mini grid. So how do you get visibility into your operations, and at the same time make sure that you're collecting all the revenue you can? Looked around on the market, said all of the AMI systems that are out there, the advanced metering infrastructure systems, the smart metering systems that you see in Western Europe and North America, way too large, way too expensive, and in fact those companies wouldn't even talk to an NGO that was trying to power 20 or 30 people or 20 or 30 service connections. So ultimately we designed it ourselves, and so from the ground up built a smart metering system that is low cost, because it had to be for the particular application and the applications that we envisioned, but also highly functional, or high functionality. So it provided the same level of functionality that more advanced, much more expensive smart metering systems did. So like I said, we built it from the ground up, and 3 years later we now have 30 to 35 systems operational around the world, and sold over 20,000 meters. So the system works, and I'll provide some detail on how the system works, because I think it's helpful for a couple of the additional points that I want to make near the end. But essentially, it addresses the core problem or pain point in rural utilities, and that is the three that you see here on this slide. Power can be unreliable, losses are always present and need to be minimized, and these are rural utilities, mini grids, or even central grids in faraway places. So they're very difficult to go out and read meters. So payment collection is slow, expensive. And then there's also always the element of the human element, which leads to what in the industry we call non-technical losses, the euphemism for theft. So as a bottom line, manual operations with your rural utilities prevent scalability. So meters. Many of the meters that are in use or have been in use in microgrids and many central grid utilities are what we call dumb meters. They lack functionality. They're low cost, but again, they don't give you what you really want as a utility and the direction that folks want to go. So you can't limit loads on a simple prepaid meter. You can't customize your tariffs. Once it's programmed, it's in there. It can't be changed. You can't assign different tariffs and different load limits to individual customers. You as a utility, you have no visibility into energy use. There's no reporting. There's no energy use accounting. And you're limited in terms of functionality, reach, and where you can install meters. So not surprising, Spark Meter does all of these things. We are agnostic as to urban utilities, as to rural microgrids. Our meters provide the same level of functionality to either utility. We've also designed a product line to scratch every itch that a utility might have. So that would include single phase and three phase, your large commercial customers, as well as your very small rural customers on a microgrid who might only need a very inexpensive 5-amp meter to cover light bulbs and cell phone chargers. But like I say, we have a full line of meters that we've developed in order to meet every one of these needs. In terms of our activities in West Africa, obviously the market is a good one for us. It's very interesting to us. Our largest activities right now, I guess to call them, for us is in Nigeria. We are doing a pilot right now that's funded by the U.S. Trade and Development Agency with PHED, which is the distribution company in Port Harcourt. Through that pilot, we are installing 1,000 meters and then operating those meters with PHED for 6 months to essentially show the use case and how effective smart metering will be on their network. As a preliminary, we're also at the same time evaluating a number of other DISCOs for possible pilots. We're also providing meters to a number of microgrids in Nigeria, and that's through a GIZ-funded program, the NESP, Nigeria Energy Support Program. And then there are a number of developers who we have been working with through inbound inquiries, through word of mouth. And so we now presently have a number of systems deployed in Nigeria. We're also talking to developers throughout the region, Senegal, Cameroon. We have a system deployed now in Benin. We're speaking to folks in Sierra Leone. I mean, what we've found is pretty obvious, I think, to all of our presenters and certainly participants, is that the market is growing for microgrids, and we're seeing that in the form of demand for our product. A couple of points I wanted to make directly to some of the issues related to financing these products, these projects, and financing renewable energy projects in West Africa. I mean, one of the really useful applications of a system like ours, or not a system like ours, but our system, I should say, is that what we're able to do is we can provide data and analysis on mini-grid and larger central grid utility operations, including revenue collection, losses, and operational efficiencies. All that data provides financing parties much greater visibility into the performance of their investments. So, you know, if you are an equity participant or a debt participant in a project or a series of projects that you know, rely on revenue from sales of electricity to individual customers, the use of Spark Meter allows you to see with a level of granularity that just doesn't exist elsewhere, how well your investment is doing, what's being collected, what are the losses, how those losses are being mitigated over time, and then the interventions that can be suggested in order to improve the performance of the investment. That's sort of on a post-investment side. On the pre-investment side, we also are collecting data and doing analysis for mini-grids that are already using Spark Meter. So on, I guess you could call it on a macro level, you know, we're able to take that data, look at it, and support the business case that Andrew referenced earlier to show how on a country-by-country or a regional basis these projects are making money, or if they're not making money, how they can be improved. So like I say, in a more macro sense, then we're able to use our data to show how these new utilities are functioning overall. One other, I know I'm going way over my time, but I'm going to make one other point, which I think is an important one, and this is a challenge that we've had on the finance side, in particular in Nigeria. And those of you who do business in Nigeria are familiar with this, but it's a lack of hard currency. So with transactions being done in Naira, with that currency being you know, as unpredictable, let's say, as it is, the availability of hard currency can pose a challenge to an equipment manufacturer like ourselves. So that's something that we're trying to work through so that we can make much larger sales in Nigeria and really take advantage of that market. I could say a lot more, but since everybody's looking at me saying I should shut up, I will. But thank you, and I look forward to questions.
Chris, thank you, Chris, for your excellent presentation. That helped us all have a better understanding of the challenges and opportunities that exist, particularly in Nigeria, when it comes to working relationship with electricity companies and mini-grid projects using low-cost prepaid enabled smart meter systems. Thank you, Chris. For the remaining time, I will now open the floor for Q&A, but I would like to address the first question to one of our panelists, Andrew. Andrew, investors' capital is moving into emerging business model developed by international startups active in East Africa and increasingly in West Africa. CEADIR's work shows a large number of indigenous startups making headways in the space, including installation of rooftop solar, biomass to gel fuel, and small hydropower, to name a few. Are local investors playing a role supporting these companies? Why and why not? What can your experience suggest for African institutions with available capital? Andrew?
I think these early stage startup companies, debt is a big issue for them because of the working capital that they have to finance, and the fact that particularly when they, if they provide equipment to their customers and then take service fees, they have to fund the equipment, and they haven't got enough money to fund all equity, their infrastructure installations. But debt is a big topic, as is local currency debt. The local banks and microfinance providers are the obvious people to provide, but the credit is a big issue. These are not proven credits yet. And then you've got hard currency versus local currency that Chris just mentioned. Let me talk about equity, because most startups are funded by equity. You've got a fantastic example of an indigenous investor in West Africa with Aecon Lighting Africa and Samba Batili making a big splash in the off-grid space. But it's true, and it's not just true in West Africa, it's true in East Africa as well. Too much of the equity money is from outside Africa. It's wealthy individuals, it's philanthropic agencies, it's government donors who are putting most of the money up for these startup type companies. We're starting to see investors out of Silicon Valley. As Chris will tell you, he's in the Spark Meter, I believe, is in the Shell Foundation program and is in the Factory Ventures program out of Colorado. Chris, just to note, I confessed it on Wednesday. I am an investor in one of your competitors. I'm one of the shareholders in Steamaco. So really, there aren't enough African investors because there isn't a tradition of venture investment. I've been talking to people in Nigeria about starting internet accelerators and shared workspaces in Lagos. But really, when the risks are that great, there's a really serious risk of losing all your money in these kinds of investments. And on the deals that I've done, I've tried to invite local investors, wealthy people, people I've known who are influential to come in and join me. And every now and again, I've been successful. But nowhere near enough. This sector needs to mature. As far as institutional money is concerned, African pension funds and insurance companies are just about starting to switch into equity, into listed equity. This is the most risky form of equity there is in venture capital. And really, there's practically no money from African institutions in alternatives of any sort yet, even large-scale private equity. So it's a way off before we see serious institutional money channels into venture capital in Africa. But the opportunities are fantastic, I think. So I would love to see more influential and wealthy people having a go, but you shouldn't believe that this is the path to untold wealth. You do it because you're interested in it, and if you make some money, that's a bonus.
Thank you very much, Andrew. I think now I need to ask another panelist one more question, then we'll go to the audience. The question goes to Chris. How is the demonstration project Spark Meter is implementing in Nigeria helping to address the difficult financial situation? Do you see measurable results based on your work so far?
Thanks, Sharif. Our pilot in Nigeria is really just starting. So we expect to be installing our meters within the next couple of weeks. There's been quite a lot of prep work. What I can tell you is that the DISCO, PHED, has done an enumeration of the customers and consumers in the pilot area, this 1,000-meter, sort of like I said, the pilot section. It looks to be at about 45% of the individuals who are using electricity in that feeder are consumers and not customers. So these people will be getting meters for the first time. So, straight off the bat, this is going to be, 100% increase in revenue collection, or it's hoped anyway, in this feeder. Now, obviously, that's not going to be solely due to using Spark Meter. If they install prepaid simple meters there, they'd achieve the same increase in revenue. But one of the things that we'll be able to do for them is provide alerts whenever there's tampering with meters, whereby the utility gets emails within 12 hours when something's gone wrong with a meter. So if somebody tries to bypass it or block the communications, the utility will be able to zero in on where that's happening and remedy the problem. Today they have absolutely no idea where folks are bypassing meters with absent a visual inspection. So I think what they'll see is an increase in revenue straight off the bat, but then the ability to actually maintain that increase over time through using the functionality of Spark Meter. We've seen this across the board, not just in West Africa, but throughout Africa and Asia, where microgrid utilities have switched over from dumb systems and using to Spark Meter, and the increase in revenue collection and efficiencies has been marked. So we expect to see the same thing, and I look forward to coming back in 6 months and telling you exactly how well it worked.
So we have a few minutes left, about 11 minutes left. We'll now take a few questions from the audience. And before I do some statistics, we have about 68 participants online, calling from over 20 countries around the globe. So the first question will go to Andrew. The question is coming from Karim. And here's the questions. From your experience in CDC and beyond, what will you recommend as development financial institution and EU-led initiative like Electrify to go further in their effort to promote energy universal access in sustainable manner? So this question comes from Karim. Andrew?
Thanks, Karim. I'm sorry, I was just unmuting my microphone. Karim, I personally think that Electrify has done some remarkable work. It's been really interesting to follow. Where it can be most helpful, I think, is on the debt side. I think that the issue has been the unbankability of funding for infrastructure and working capital. And donor capital can help provide credit enhancement to encourage local financial institutions to get involved, to start banks and MFIs to start lending. It's the concept I think you call blending. But there's been this view that there's got to be some risk, residual risk that's carried by the lender. I think the philosophy is that there has to be skin in the game for the bank or the MFI. That's really holding it back. I think it's really important to get loans out there where the lenders know they're not going to lose money, and then see whether these businesses are creditworthy, and structure them and support them to do that. On the equity side, I'm not sure that you really need official money taking venture risk. It is tough to raise equity, but generally I don't think government institutions are particularly effective when it comes to making those kinds of calls. And indeed, because the likelihood is you're going to lose money, you tend to get into all kinds of trouble when you do. So help us with the debt. That would be great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andrew. The next question comes from Patrick Daddario, and this question goes to Heidi. And here's the question. Is the LERC actually up and running? Heidi?
Yes, Charles, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, thank you, Patrick. The LERC is not yet running. Actually, the milestone that should have been achieved some 6-7 months ago. The president of Liberia has just appointed the commissioners, all right, for the commission a couple of weeks ago, and that the commissioners are now awaiting, the nominated commissioners are now awaiting confirmation by the Liberian Senate, after which that will pave the way for MCC funding through the MCA to support the LERC. Thank you.
Thank you, Heidi. I have another question, and this one goes to Chris. Here's the question. What incentive does your company have to provide power to countries that are extremely poor to buy enough product for their rural areas? And this question comes from
Hi, Reza. So we don't actually provide the power. What we as Spark Meter provide the metering solution for the developer or the utility who sells the power. I mean, our goal as a company is to provide that metering operations and revenue collection system at a price point that will enable your small rural utility operator to provide energy in a sustainable manner. In other words, at a price point that rural villagers who are only using energy to charge light bulbs and maybe to power light bulbs and charge phones, so that they're able to provide that at a cost that the rural poor can afford. Like I said, we don't provide it, but we enable that. And we're always trying to drive down our prices so that the economics of the microgrid, the renewable energy microgrid for a very poor community work. So we see ourselves as a piece of that puzzle. And as Andrew and others, Charles I know mentioned as well, is that there are a number of other pieces to that puzzle that are that's financing, that's government. It's folks like Hadi who are providing the enabling environment in some countries. We're all of us trying to bring those prices down to enable energy provided to the rural poor that you identify.
Thank you, Chris. Time is running out, so we have one last question for Heidi. Liberia's situation is somewhat unique given its recent history. The rapid decrease of solar prices is fostering the potential for mini-grid to serve as an alternative to the main grid until community graduates to the main grid once their consumption is high enough. Is this a dynamic that MCC anticipates in Liberia, and why not?
Thank you very much, Charles, for the question. This is a very relevant question, very good question, but I may not speak for the MCC, but the MCA Liberia is a government of Liberia agency that is supportive of our national development agenda, which is the agenda for transformation, as well as the government investment plan for renewable energy. This investment plan for renewable energy recognizes the relevance of investing in renewable energy, and that this investment plan has earmarked 18 18 projects, mini-grids and standalone solar PV system projects with an estimated cost of about $178 million. Honestly, given the fact that the grid extension is taking much longer and it behooves us to look at those interim solutions that will tend to help increase access, especially getting involved into mini-grids and solar PV or solar standalone systems in the rural areas of Liberia, including hybrid systems. As a matter of fact, the World Bank is currently funding through the Rural and Renewable Energy Agency a mini-grid in Lofa County in north of Liberia, which is a hybrid system, 1.5 megawatt hydro, right? And the EFDB also is planning to support another hybrid project down to the southeast. So these mini-grids are essential, and therefore, not speaking for the MCC, but the MCA recognizes that effort and thinks that that should be the way.
Thank you, Hedy. Now, we are now come to the end of our webinar. I would like to thank our distinguished panelists for the valuable contribution to this discussion. This has been an interesting and educational session with a lot of valuable takeaways. If there are any additional questions we did not cover, we will work with our panelists to respond to the questions and send them out along with a link to this webinar recording and presentation. Thank you again for joining and participating in our webinar today. Have a wonderful weekend. Thank you.